Hello, everybody. Greetings to all. Welcome to the Snooker Hole podcast. I'm Dan Murren. The UK Championship is in the books. A wonderful event in terms of drama and excitement. The final certainly did not disappoint. To review and analyse an event of this magnitude, I'm joined by a very special friend of the podcast. He is the chief writer, he is the brains and the muscle behind Totally Snookered. It is an honour to welcome Michael Day back to the Snooker Hole podcast.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure being on here again.
How much of the UK Championship were you able to see?
All of it, 100%.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been really busy, obviously, and of course, to the sort of casual snooker fans, they think that the event started last Saturday in York, but as we know, the qualifiers were on for 6 days, and they were intense. Sort of morning, afternoon, evening sessions for the first 4 days, and such a big event for the players. So that was almost like an event in itself, the qualifying. So been a really busy time, but really enjoyable. First Triple Crown of the season out of the way, but fantastic, brilliant event.
No, I thought it went down really well, and the qualifying as well. There were some really good matches in that qualifying phase. The standout for me would have been Elliot Slesser versus Stephen Maguire.
Yeah,
That was a good one. 6-5. I knew that would go close. That was decent snooker.
Yeah,
Stephen
very
Maguire,
good.
he did make it through to York. I thought 6-0 was a bit harsh. Losing to Kyron Wilson. I don't think he was 6-0 bad. All right, Kyron was the better player, but I thought 6-0 was a little bit mean.
Just a bizarre game, really, that was. See someone like Maguire play like that. Wasn't his pot success rate something down like 50% or something crazy like that? I mean, when do you ever see that in a professional match? And I'm a big fan of Maguire. I love the way he plays. I love his sort of attitude. You can tell it means a lot to him, and I love to see that in players. And obviously, it does sort of bubble over at times, but it shows that he wants it so much. And it's a shame because that was a potential. Nothing against Kyron, of course, but that was a potential sort of match where one of the seeds could have gone out. Maguire's got an amazing record in the UK Championship. A couple of really good wins in qualifying, as you say, because Slesser's been, one of the best players, perhaps out of the top 16 on the circuit this season. I think Slesser's, along with players like Wait Klin and Zhao Gudong, one of the most improved players over the last sort of 12, 18 months. He seems to be consistently getting to last 32, 16s, quarters now. But yeah, very strange game that.
Now this point you make about he wants it, that is a good point, because when you see someone who actually displays a bit of passion, if they're not playing 100%, or I'd say not even close to 100% in Stephen Maguire's case, to see that little bit of anger, that little inner rage, it does show that they actually care. And when you compare that with other players who have said that they don't really care about the sport is boring, I know which one I'd rather watch. Stephen Maguire. Every day.
Well, he was box office, wasn't he, in the World Championship, Maguire?
Yeah, he was.
With Carter, and that game against Murphy, that was, a brilliant game. There was a bit of needle there, and, I like that. Bring it on. I mean, people say, oh, it's all, it's all gentlemanly and this and that. Yeah, of course it is. At the end of the game, you shake hands. But during the, I like that. I like to see that, and I think moving forward there may be a few of the comments we've seen online about certain things during the championship, that might add a bit of spice for the remainder of the season. But I'm sure we'll come on to that later on.
I'm sure we will, because there is a lot to talk about with that one. Yeah. For me, one of the things I noticed in the early rounds, especially, a lot of 6-4s, a lot of 6-5s. What do you think this means for the snooker tour?
Superb. I mean, brilliant. I mean, yeah, it was. God, what looked at a stat last night, wasn't there something like 10 or so deciding frames, matches? Really good, close getting. It just shows the tour now. The tour are so sort of close together. A player outside the top 32 can give a one of the top seeds, a really good game. And let's be honest, some of the first round matches were sort of low on quality at times. Even with Judd Trump, he sort of had really slow starts against Robertson and Higgins. But I don't know about you, Dan, or other snooker fans, but I think I'd prefer seeing a really close finish than actually a good game, high quality game, because that's sort of like drama. If they can't pot a ball, who cares? They're so unpredictable. It's brilliant, and we've had some amazing finishes. Um, we really have. I mean, like the semi final with Allen and Hawkins. I was still up. I was still up.
Yeah,
And it was engrossing. And I remember like Steve Davis saying about snooker can be slow at times. It could be this that, but if you stay with a match, it will reward you. And that game certainly did.
it's true. I would agree with that because, all right, there's another factor to discuss with that match, but that was a good match. And I think the fact that Mark Allen did play a little bit more cautiously, I think that shows the respect that he has for Barry Hawkins. He knows that you can't just play willy-nilly shots against someone like the Hawk because he'll punish you. But 6-5, well, actually in the first round, 4 6-5s and 7 more 6-4s.
Mm-hmm.
So this is close. This is good competition. This means that not okay. There were 1 or 2 blowouts, but this is good stuff. This is, and if one player is kind of forcing their opponent into mistakes, then bring it on.
Yeah, yeah. And we also saw sort of like several comebacks as well during the tournament. Some of them
True.
are fantastic comebacks. Obviously, Zhang Anders recovery against Stuart Bingham. That's remarkable because Bingham was banging form. Obviously, on nearly hit 147. He's on course for a maxi. But Zhang coming back from 5-1, and especially against someone like Bingham as well, who's so sort of streetwise and experienced. That was a brilliant comeback, and it's quite ironic because Stuart come back from 5-2 down against Mark Williams in round 1, so he's on the receiving end of a comeback in the end.
Got a taste of his own medicine.
Yeah.
One of the big early talking points was Jack Lazowski. So he got through against Mark Selby. That was a really good match overall, actually. What did you think of Jack's performance and the reaction to Jack's performance?
Oh, did I think of Jack? I thought he was. They were probably the best 2 back-to-back performances on TV we've maybe ever seen from Jack in terms of sort of consistency. And I feel for Mark Selby because he started that game like a train. Didn't he have something like a couple of tons? And he was absolutely fantastic opening 3 frames. But Jack was brilliant in the second half and got the job done. And then he backed it up in the last 16 with another win. And then in the quarters, I mean, I watched almost all of his quarterfinal game with Mark Allen. It's obvious that Jack is a crowd favourite. Don't get me wrong; he's so frustrating to watch at times because there is an unforced error in there, or it could be a slack safety or an unexpected missed pot, something like that. But I think perhaps for the fans that adds maybe a sense of extra drama. There's an extra layer there because you don't know what he's going to do. But yeah, I think he will be a little bit upset the way he sort of went out against Mark Allen. He 3-1 up in the mid-session interval, then didn't win another frame. I think there was a really close frame after the interval that he lost. That was crucial. But I thought Jack was fantastic to watch. I just hope that he does get this this title, this ranking event, whatever it is, this monkey off his back soon. But yeah, fantastic. He was certainly one of the stories of the event.
I would agree. His performance was good. I felt, in my opinion, there was a little bit of an overreaction to his performance. I thought he played well, but he had to play well in order to win the match because Mark Selby was doing well as well. So I felt it was a little bit too much. It's the best performance he's ever put in, and maybe that is true, but it only really matters if he goes on to win the tournament. And I don't know. I just felt it was a bit
over the top.
overreaction, a bit over the top, a bit OTT, just a little
It,
bit,
it
just
kind
a
of
little bit for
reminded me
me.
of when he got to the quarters at the Crucible a couple of years ago, when he beat Neil Robertson 13-12. So that was the game I think where Robertson made the 147. I think, wasn't it?
Possibly, yeah.
I think that was the game he made the 147. And Jack, I remember sort of before the game, people were like, "Oh well, no, a long game like that, Robertson's going to be firm favourite." But Jack, I thought from that game that would be the game where he matures in terms of being a more rounded sort of like match player. But then he lost to Higgins in the quarters 13-12. And I do often wonder, you talk about like sliding doors moments. I just wonder if he beat Higgins on that occasion and he got to the one table setup, what would have happened? Um, you don't know how a player is going to react in that sort of situation. One table at the Crucible. Um, he may have thrived in that. He might have won the world championship that year. You don't know. I think he would have had Ronnie in the semis though, so that might have been a bit tricky. But um, yeah, perhaps there was an overreaction with Jack, but I think he's such a popular player. I think people want to see him do well and want to see him win one, and I think that sort of encouragement, they're trying to get momentum behind him and everything like that. But overall, it was a fantastic event for him. It's interesting though because I was looking at the rankings. He hasn't moved because he got to the semis 2 years ago. So he was defending
Um,
£50,000. So he actually lost money from his ranking total being in the quarters, getting 25,000. But I was looking at the latest list this morning. He hasn't moved.
okay.
Um, so that's, but that's the nature of the ranking list.
No, it's true. Yeah, it encourages consistency and over a long period of time. And I suppose speaking of the ranking list now, it's probably the perfect time to bring it up. Luca Brissell. That was not a good way to lose.
No, it wasn't. But I think there were. I watched quite a bit of that game actually against Jack Jones. Of course, it wasn't vintage Luca, but I do think there were sort of just little sparks there, little sort of signs of encouragement for his fans. I think he's putting the work in. I think he's putting a lot more work in over the last few weeks. I saw on his Instagram actually, uh, was it either yesterday or over the weekend? He put a picture up of his practice table, and something about him putting the hard work in. So I really do think, and he's slimmed down a bit as well. We know that he's doing this Ironman challenge thing, so he's looking better as well. Um, of course, he's in big trouble in terms of the 1 year list, but I've got a feeling he'll be all right. I still think there's going to be a run in him somewhere, and wouldn't it be the most Luca Brissell thing if he was to go to the Crucible and win it again or something like that? Do you know what I mean? Because he seems to come out from nowhere when he does have these runs. So I think he'll be okay. What do you think, Dan?
I agree completely, 100%. I think he is good enough to come out and just make a semi-final at a big tournament one time, and then maybe he'll have another first round exit, but then he'll go and win the Welsh Open or something like that. It wouldn't actually be a massive surprise if he
Mm.
switches it on
Yeah,
and he's focused. It could happen,
yeah.
I think. And given the fact that the tour is so tight and so competitive, people are taking points and prize money off each other all the time. I think it's going to take a remarkable series of events for him to drop off tour.
I think the problem is though is I was looking at the structure of the calendar. The second half of the season, if you're not in the Players Series events, there's only a few ranking events. You've got obviously you've got the Welsh Open, World Open, German Masters, and Worlds. And the qualifiers for those for lower ranked players are just before Christmas. So if you go out of those two competitions and you're not in the World Grand Prix in Hong Kong, you've only got a couple of events in the second half of the season. Um, I personally think perhaps I don't like being critical of the World Snooker Tour necessarily. It's there's a million things to consider, but I do think the structure of the calendar perhaps needs to be looked at. For the lower ranked players, they could be playing just two or three events before the World Championship from the start of the new year. So I don't know. Could they perhaps rejig? Maybe have the Scottish Open after, the New Year, or the shootout after New Year. But again, there's so many things you've got to consider in terms of TV and venues and tickets and other events. But for Luca, going back to Luca, he's not in the top 32 on the 1 year list. So that's pretty much 3 events he's not going to be in: the World Grand Prix Players and the Tour.
True.
So where is he going to get the points from? He's got the Welsh Open, he's got the German, he's got the World Open. So there's 3 events. He's obviously got the Scottish Open coming up. I think if he went into the World Championship needing, to win, or needing to win last 16, that could be a bit hairy for him. Because obviously, being one of the top seeds, you don't get any points if you lose your opening game. So I think he needs a run, in the next 2 or 3 events. Else, anything could happen.
Well, that's a good point. Anything could happen. It could be that he just goes on, well, continuing as he is. First round exits, second round exits. But as I said, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary because he did it last season. I think it was the Welsh Open. He just randomly made the quarterfinals.
Yes, that's the only quarters he's made in a ranking event since winning the Worlds, which is incredible to think, really.
Yeah.
Do you think, Dan, that if he did drop off, do you think he should be given a tour card, invitational card?
I don't think so. No.
No, I don't either.
No. For someone like Stephen Hendry, a true legend
Yeah,
of the game, Ken Doherty, true legend,
yeah,
Jimmy White, people like
yeah,
that, absolutely give them a tour card because that increases the awareness. Get some nostalgia fans invested in the sport. But for Luca Brissell, I suppose it depends on why he's not. If I know some players get tour cards or wild cards based on medical reasons, or their tour card is protected because of
yeah,
medical reasons, things like that. If there were a legitimate reason why Luca Brissell were not performing as we would expect him to, or as he would expect himself to, then maybe we could consider that. But if it's just because he's just not playing that well, then no. Sport is a competition. It's the best. It doesn't matter
yeah,
who you are. It's what you do that matters. And I
yeah.
would say that's true with any sport.
I think Dave Ender made a very good point about this. He was saying that the invitational tour cards are for sort of you know older legends of the game, like you say, Jimmy, Ken, Hendry, James Watner in the past. Whereas someone like Luca is still in his pomp, in his prime. I don't think it's not me being against Anti Luca because I'm a big fan of him, but I don't think he should get a free ticket. Um, just back on the tour. And it was interesting because I don't know if you remember, Dan, but somebody online said several years ago that somebody said that all former world champions are allowed, would if they want to play on the tour they can. But I never remember I remember them doing an announcement in one of the world championships maybe about 10, 11, 12 years ago when Betfred were involved as the sponsor, and they were any world champion can play in the qualifiers. Do you remember that? I remember that. I remember them saying that any former world champion could enter the qualifiers, because I remember there was a discussion online saying, "Well, what you're going to get." When Ray Reardon was alive, see, what would Ray Reardon be allowed to play in it? Would Dennis Taylor be able to play in it? I remember that, but I don't remember them saying that world champions would be given a free tour card.
I don't remember this. That
No,
doesn't
I
ring a
think
bell
that's
for
just.
me.
I think that's one of those, housewives' tales or whatever. It's not
Yeah,
true.
that's what do you call them? The sensationalist rumors that has just been
Yeah,
twisted a
just
little bit here
circulate.
and there, and eventually it's become every world champion will just qualify for the Crucible. And then
Yeah.
it just evolves bit by bit by bit. No, I don't remember that at all.
No, neither do I.
No, it sounds. I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't like that idea.
No.
It defeats the object of sport.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Neil Robertson, what were your thoughts on his match with Judd Trump? I thought it was a good match personally.
Yeah, it was a good game. Game of two halves, obviously. First half was very protracted, scrappy, low quality, really. Um, although I didn't Robertson, I think made a ton in frame four, didn't he? Went into the mid session interval 3-1 up. Yeah, it was just a nightmare draw for both of them, wasn't it? Really. I mean, Robertson's the most decorated qualifier there, just missed out on top 16, and for Robertson, Trump is the world number one, so it was a hideous draw for both of them. There was a little added element because they'd played in the Champions Week before, and a few things had been said after the game. And yeah, no, I did enjoy it. Again, it was one of those matches where it was a bit of a hard sell early on, but I think it just exhibits Judd Trump's match play acumen and why he's the world number one at the minute, because he's prepared to dig in. If he's not playing well, and there've been times in this championship where he's not been hitting the ball quite right, or he's been a couple of frames down, he's dug in and he's got on with it. He's not sort of, sulked or got down on himself. He's just carried on. And to be honest, I actually don't think, on the season as a whole, that he's played fantastically all throughout the season. I think he's just such a good match player now. Scraps away, digs in, and he gets the job done. I think he's so dangerous now. He's the best he's ever been in terms of sort of match play roundness, and he's still got those elements of naughty snooker and making the big breaks out of nowhere. So I think that was more of a sort of a plus on Judd Trump's side that he was managed to get out of that game, because he could have got bogged down, and he has done before with Neil Robertson, like the 2020 UK final, perhaps the Champions match the other week. But one of the biggest events we've got on the circuit, he's dug in this week, and credit to him for that.
I would always compare it with the football cliche, winning ugly. You
Mm,
don't win the championship based on the time when you beat relegation fodder 5-0. It's
mm.
when you can scrap it out against Champions League
Yep.
contenders and you scrape out that 2-1 win or something like that.
Yep.
It's Yeah, you can't always play naughty
No.
snooker, perfect snooker, flowing snooker. And if you're playing someone who, at the moment, Neil Robertson, who I think is nowhere near his best, it can be a bit of a drag. And it was the fifth frame for me was key. Neil Robertson 3-1 up, he should have been 4-1 up. At
Yes.
4-1, you never know.
Yeah.
He's two-thirds of the way to the finish line. But no, Judd managed to win that 3-2. At 3-2, it's game on. And I've been saying it for a long time, and I agree 100% with what you said. It's not just the ability to play is important, but it's how to play. And it's how you use your skills in a specific moment. It's the ability to adapt, it's the ability to think, it's the composure, it's the intelligence, and it's the experience, which you cannot buy. But Judd Trump has it in droves now. I've said for over a year now that he is the most complete player on the table in snooker.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
stand by it. He's so hard to beat, and when he's in the balls, if he misses, it's a shock. He
Yeah.
just doesn't look like missing. You just think, right, well, this frame's over. You can always go and make a cup of tea for 5 minutes and just keep a half an eye on it because you know he's going to win. Yeah,
But
he's ruthless. He's inevitable at times.
but he's also got, obviously, those explosive performances in him as well. I mean, the quarterfinal game against Zhang. Well, I mean, wow, 4 tons, three of
Yeah,
those in a row, 527 unanswered points. So, and that was in the middle of the tournament. He's had two games either side of that. So for me, Judd is, he is the complete player at the minute. He really is, and he's so difficult to beat. When he's not playing well, he's finding a way. He's now won. I've got a post coming out on our social. He's now won the three most lucrative events of this season so
yep.
far. So he's won the Shanghai Masters. That was 210 grand. Saudi 500,000. UK $250,000. So when people say about criticizing for not winning the big events, well, he couldn't have won any bigger. He's won the three biggest so far, and to be on like 1.2 million pound prize money, and it's just December now, is crazy. I mean, he's going to end up. I mean, goodness me, we've got so many big money events coming up over the next couple of months. Goodness knows how much he's going to amass in terms of
He
prize
could
money.
easily make it to two with a good. If he wins the world championship, you'd bet on him making 2 mil.
Oh, of course, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's going to be one of the favourites for the Masters. He's already a two-time champion there.
Mhm.
There's a couple. Well, there's another Yeah, the Grand Prix, that prize
Yeah,
money's gone up. The Tour Championship, that's what 200 odd grand for the winner. He could easily make 2 mil for playing
the, the
snooker.
yeah
What a
the
job!
Riyadh event before Christmas.
Oh, of course, I even forgot
That's
about that. Yeah, yeah,
to be honest, actually, it's interesting because I think quite a lot of people have there's not been great talk about that. Obviously the Masters is huge, so people have been talking about the top 16 for a lot of the week, the ranking implications. But this has also been the last event for the cutoff for the event in Riyadh, so the top 10, and the winner of that gets $250,000. If you're one of the top seeds, you're in the quarter straight away. So, Trump's guaranteed another 50 grand there, for example. So it's.
and yeah, I forgot about it because if somebody does hit the 167, then it's $1 million of prize money. So what's that in pounds? Probably like 800 grand,
Something like
something
that,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So is that official prize money? Do you think? I'm sure it is.
Yeah, it wouldn't obviously go to the ranking list, but
Yeah, of course.
go to, I think it'd be on all official records.
Yeah,
It would just be interesting to see what happens if a 167 is made, because does it go on the 147 list and there's an asterisk next to it, or do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
That's the well, yeah. That was the old debate. Is it
Yeah,
really a maximum because you've not done 15 reds, 15 blacks, and yeah, like a
yeah,
149 if you had a free ball or something would not be a. Can you do a 149 with a free ball? I don't think you can you? It'd have to be 150. A 16 red, but then you need a red and a yellow. So I don't think
yeah.
149 is
You could make
possible.
anything between 147 to
Yeah, then you take a
155.
pink as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that takes 120. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I know there was a lot of a lot of things have been said about the gold ball event in Riyadh, and whether it's a bit gimmicky or whatever. But I watched the event earlier in the year, and when Higgins was on the 167, there was a buzz there. Whether
There
it was
was. True.
whether it was a bit, I don't know, but I was feeling it. I'm sure he was feeling it as well. If somebody gets to, I would really like to see what would happen if they get to like the final blue and pink, because you're going to have to leave an angle on the black to get back up to the bulk cushion to pop the gold ball. So the dynamics are different for that, and it will be interesting to see what would happen. Uh, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
maybe open the pockets up a bit. I don't know. Do they want to give the prize away? I'm not sure. they
they can afford it. They
they can
can
afford
afford
it. They
it.
probably do. Yeah, but I mean, what happens though if somebody does make it? It's a bit like I used to love watching the old Deal or No Deal, the quiz game. Do
Yeah.
you remember that? And as soon I know this is an analogy, but when they won the $250,000, I said, oh, wow, wow, it's amazing. It's sort of then, for me, it was like, oh, well, it's been done now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. It's yeah. Once someone's achieved it, it's not special anymore. If everyone does it, if it happens once a season, then it's yeah, yeah. It's a good point. Good point. But yeah, I think it would be. Well, Alex Ferguson said it. Squeaky bum time. If you're
Yeah,
on that.
yeah,
And I did
yeah,
notice a few times in that exhibition. I call it an exhibition because it's not a real ranking tournament, really. It's Mark Williams was on. He lost. I think he lost 6-2. I forget who he lost to, but at one point he took on a risky shot to stay on the black, which in a normal match he would never have done. But for $500,000, you know what? Maybe you take the chance. So I do think the tactics they are different, and it's not a massive change, but it might affect the mindset when you take on this shot. Is it worth the risk? Yeah, let's do it. So, but you know what? That's a different format of snooker. It's like the shootout.
yeah.
Something different. It's
Yeah, isn't that quite that's a quite a quick turnaround, isn't it? From the UK Championship, one of the longer formats we have, one of the most prestigious events, and to one of the shortest, the shortest event, the shootout within a couple of days. Now,
yeah,
I,
short
I, I
days.
love, I actually, I love watching the shootout. I really enjoy it. I think once a year, I don't understand the hate it gets. Each to everyone's opinion, but I think I think it's a fantastic watch. I know people who don't really tune in for much snooker elsewhere, but they watch the shootout because it's quick and attention spans these days and everything like that. I think it is a big tool actually. The shootout. I think a lot more people watch it than probably people realise. Of course, there's a debate: should it be a ranking event, etc. I've got over that now. To be honest, it's a ranking event. Get over it. The players voted for it to be a ranking event, so several years ago, and it's kind of the position it's in terms of the calendar. It's kind of a no lose tournament because you probably turn up there thinking, well, you can't think you're going to win it because it's such a lottery at times. But the further you get into the tournament, you can only really sort of gain, if that makes sense. And if you can get to the finals night, you're within a few frames of winning a 50 grand, a ranking title that gets you up the rankings, all these other events. So you can only really gain from the shootout. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the shootout. More sort of like the final day, where it sort of really sort of ramps up and the prize money doubles, etc. But yeah, it's a bit of a change from the UK and York.
Yeah, there is a lot of history, a lot of prestige around these tournaments, and I know the shootout doesn't hold the same status. Everyone will agree with that, but you need to be good to win the shootout. When you look at
Yes,
the list of finalists, okay, there's one or two surprise names in there. Julian Leclerc recently, but Chris Wakelin won it. He's made another couple of big finals since then. That's not a fluke. Mark Allen, one of the greatest players in snooker right now. We'll come on to him in a minute. And yeah, it's not a fluke. And I suppose, yeah, this idea that it's a lottery is, yeah, okay, a bit of good luck will help, a bit of bad luck could be disastrous, but I guess I don't want to say you make your own luck because that's an awful cliche, but you can't be an average player and do well in the shootout because I think the ability to think quickly, the ability to assess the situation and act without hesitation,
yeah.
that's not a skill that every player possesses.
I think there is a profile of a certain player who can win the shootout. There are players in the past who have played in several shootouts and they've got terrible records, really. So shows that they're not sort of like thriving in those conditions. But yeah, I think you do need certain elements to win the shootout. I don't necessarily. Have we had that sort of really slow player win the shootout? Not really. So you do kind of have to be a little bit sort of. You've got to be a quick thinker, fairly quick thinker. And I think it's being streetwise more than anything. If you've got a couple of minutes left, you've got a little lead. Do you take this risky cut black or whatever, or do you just dump the cue ball up the table, put something safe? So when I look at the former winners of the shootout, a lot of them are really sort of street smart. You like your Anthony McGill's, Nigel Bonds back in the day,
Yeah.
like say Mark Allen. So they're really sort of street smart. But then you've got like people like Tapchira New, who won it. If you think who's going to win the shootout, he'd probably be number one on most people's list. Well, he's the quickest player on tour. He's going to win it.
Boom, boom, boom.
He
Yeah.
was scintillating. So who knows? But I think you do need a certain profile to win the shootout.
Back to the UK Championship.
Yep.
We got to the final four. Kyron Wilson, Judd Trump, Barry Hawkins, Mark Allen. I'm going to say two different styles of match. Out of the two, which one would I rather watch again? Maybe this is going to be a controversial one. Some people are not going to be in agreement with this. But I would say the Mark Allen, Barry Hawkins one. That was intriguing for me.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? It's gone down to a deciding frame. And it was just, what I was saying before. Nothing against Judd and Kyron. That was the world champion versus the world number one. But in the end, it was, 6-2. In the end, it was comfortable for Trump. I know the table conditions, I think Kyron was a little bit upset with some of the conditions. But the Allen Hawkins game went to a deciding frame, late night drama. For a hardcore snooker fan, what more do you want?
And, well, there's a few talking points with both of these matches. With the Kyron match, okay, he was, I'm going to say, fairly comfortably beaten by, I'm going to say, his big rival at the moment, and he's beaten Judd in a few big events this season.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit of revenge there for Judd. But Kyron's comments afterwards, I don't want to drop anyone in it, but then he proceeded to drop people in it and complain about the table conditions and say that the table fitters are not up to scratch, whatever it may be. What are your thoughts on, because he's doing a lot of moaning at the moment, I think. And do you think, okay, he's the world champion, of course, he deserves a lot of credit. Do you think he's going a little bit too moany, or are you still okay with this?
Personally, I'm okay with it. I think Kyron is. I think he's a fantastic ambassador as world champion. I think he actually, away from the table, his image, work he does for things like charity, and I actually think he's a really good ambassador for our sport, a really amazing world champion. I think he was entitled to. I think he was entitled to say about the tables. My the only issue I have when players go out on public, after a match, straight after a match where the emotions have been high, the adrenaline's draining out of them. Perhaps maybe have a word backstage with the officials before you talk to the press or public. But if you've got an issue with the table, I think you can report it, or you can tell the referee to report it. And I read in one of the newspapers following this that they'd only had 2 reports all week about the tables. So if a player's got an issue with the table, they need to, before they speak to anybody else, need to speak to the tournament director or head ref or whoever it is to say, hey, that table's rolling off a bit, or it's a bit slow, a bit bouncy, whatever. So, and I hope the players understand. I'm not gagging the players. I think the players, if they're not happy with conditions, yeah, but they should be doing it through the right channels, in my opinion.
It's been a few times where, not just Kyron, a lot of players have done it at the World Championship. Judd Trump, immediately after his defeat to Jack Jones, complaining about Jack's slow style of play. And Judd again against Neil Robertson, saying that Neil was lucky, or that Judd himself was unlucky. It's that heat of the moment, and I know we want honest answers, but these are competitive sports people. They're not going to take losing lightly.
No.
And I do think there should be, that's not a bad idea actually. Speak to someone else beforehand, even if it's just 2 minutes with the tournament director or one of the referees, and just let it out. And then maybe you'll be a little bit more composed and maybe a bit more measured with their responses, because I know some people have, especially on social media, the haven of sanity, have been calling Kyron a prima donna and, oh, well, he's only sour grapes, he's only moaning because he lost. If he'd won, the table would have been great. But this is Kyron Wilson. The ambition that he has shown this season is incredible. It's remarkable and it's admirable. And listening to his brother on Talking Snooker, that ambition is clear. And it's not just from Kyron, it's from Taylor, and it's from the whole team.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's not going to rest on his laurels. And when you hear that even before he won the World Championship, he was already talking about breaking the Crucible curse. He wants these... he wants recognition, and he knows the only way to get recognition is to win titles.
Yeah.
And if he's losing in the semi-final, obviously he hasn't won, and that's a blow. So I think, yeah,
it's a disappointment for him because he was in the semis. Only the second time he's ever been in the semis of the UK. He could have that would have been an amazing feat to win the Worlds and UKs in the same calendar year. Very close. If he'd beaten Judd, he would have been favourite against Barry in the final. Obviously, we don't know how it would have panned out. So it would have been disappointing the way he went out, losing 6 frames in a row from being 2-0 up. So again, it's quite interesting that they interview the losers of a match straight away. It's fairly sort of quite a recent thing over the last couple of years, if I recall. Getting a winner after they come off the table, great. They get their spirits, they're high. It's gonna be a great interview. I'm sometimes a little bit. Do they need to speak to the loser straight after a game? It's almost like they want them to say something a bit edgy or a bit controversial. Do you know what I mean? Because what they're going to say, what do you ask them? What's the interview supposed to ask them? Oh, how do you feel? Or what went wrong? How are they supposed to answer that? So I sometimes it would be nice, perhaps, I don't know, give them a little break first before putting a microphone in front of them.
I know they do that at tennis. So at Wimbledon, for example, the winner
Yeah,
will be
yeah,
interviewed straight away, but the
yeah.
person who loses, he or she will go to the back. They'll drop off their things in the locker room. Then they will go and face the press. And maybe they can just take that few moments just to unwind, just to let off that steam, do whatever they need to do, and just they'll be able to give a more measured response.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, maybe there is something to that. That maybe if we get them when they're just a little bit frustrated, a little bit angry, maybe we'll get a good headline out of it.
Well,
It's
100%. I mean, I'm very fortunate to work in the industry myself. So, we've had, it's been fantastic quotes. Some people come off the table upset or angry that they've just lost, and they, the way the media world is now, you can sensationalize that headline. Not that I'm comfortable with that, but it is it's a clicker for websites and newspapers, etc. If they say something a bit edgy.
and I'm going to say that was probably the least controversial of the semi-finals. The other semi-final, Barry Hawkins, Mark Allen, that got even more talking, but not because of the players, because of the commentary. What were your thoughts on the Sean Murphy, Mark Allen spat?
Oh my goodness me! How long have you got?
See your face.
It's interesting because I still don't know where the line of sort of banter between the two, which they've had lots of banter down the years. Now it's sort of seeping into actual sort of beef. It
Yeah,
is. I think we're now in beef territory. Whether or not they deliberately sort of winding each other up, I don't know. Um, Big fan of all the top players. There's no one I dislike. Um, I'll be honest. The majority of the UK Championship I've watched on Eurosport. That's just a personal choice. I like the way Eurosport have that balance of a player next to a journalist slash pundit. So, for example, you got like Neil Folds, Dave Hendon, Philip Studd, Alan McManus, etc. I like that balance as a snooker fan because I don't want to just hear about what's going on the table. I want to know what's happened elsewhere in the season, stuff like that. And I actually put a tweet out on X, and I deleted it actually because I didn't want people to sort of take it the wrong way. But I just feel as if like the BBC coverage this year, there was a little bit of element of like cost cutting, if that makes sense, because so many players were actually commentating, like Bingham, Allen, Sean, Kyron, I think commentated one of the games as well. And for me, a little element of sort of cost cutting. It's almost like, well, they're there for the tournament already. Oh, do you mind coming in to commentate? And some of the balances I didn't think worked well, so that's the reason why I switched on Eurosport. So I didn't hear Sean's commentary during the game. So I can't comment on specific things he said. I do think it is a bit of a weird dynamic having a top player who's actually in the event commentating on it on the BBC. I'm not very comfortable with that, if I'm being honest, because players can say things. Perhaps it's a little bit different for Murphy because he was already out of the tournament. If he was waiting, for the winner in the final, I think that would have been a big no-no. But sure, Sean's employed by the BBC for that event, so he's entitled. They've given him a free rein to say what he wants a commentary, so he's entitled to say what he wants. But Mark Allen's entitled to, have beef or umbrage with that.
the no this mixture that you mentioned of a player or a former player and a journalist, someone who's not a real player. I think that's very, very solid. I think it's a good base to have in the commentary box. And I've discussed this with a few snooker personalities. Stephen Hallworth, particularly, he said that he's very comfortable working with Dave Hendon because there are things that he can bring and there's knowledge that he can't bring, but Dave Hendon can bring. And I think
Exactly.
for the audience, it's for the audience. That's the most important thing. I think that's the essence of commentary. It's not
Yes.
for the players. It's not for the studio. It's so that the audience can engage more with the sport. And if we can get a wider knowledge base from two different aspects of the sport, then I would say that's the perfect combo.
I quite like earlier in the week Shabnam from BBC. I think she commentated one of the games, and it's a very tough gig commentary. To be thrust into doing one of the biggest events in the world. I think she's done fantastic, and I like that. Bring more of that on BBC. Actually have somebody who's you know reporting on the game sort of all year round instead of just the three events. Without naming names, there are some players who work for BBC who perhaps don't follow the tour all year round. So that's why I think you need someone from the journalistic slash punditry side to, when you've got a qualifier coming through, if you've got a qualifier that the general public haven't seen, say for example like He Gu Kwong, who comes through, he was the rookie of the year last year, but his first time sort of on BBC, people won't know who he is. So you need somebody there to sort of say, well, actually, he was rookie of the year last year. He got to X, Y, Z last 16s, quarters, etc. I think you do need that balance to sort of, put things into context.
Do you think Sean Murphy had a point with? Do you think Mark Allen was deliberately slowing down the game?
No play.
And what do you
I
feel
don't
about
think.
this in general? Do you think
I
this is a
don't.
legit tactic? Should the
I
referee
don't.
intervene?
Well, it's not unusual for Mark Allen in recent times. We know since like the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. His game has slowed down a little bit, but he's been winning tournaments. Before he was world number one at the start of the season, so he's not. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think he was deliberately slowing things down. No, because he's been look at the world championship semi final with Mark Selby. That went on for a long time. That was I've got no issues with Mark playing like that. Yeah, yeah, he lost the game as well. Mark didn't win the match, so I mean, yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, people might think that he's deliberately slow. I don't think he was deliberately playing slow. I personally do. I do think though that it's not for me to criticise Mark Allen, but I just wonder whether or not because he's grown up, most of his professional career, this sort of like attacking player, fairly quick player. He has sort of like turned his game into a bit more. I don't know how to describe it, but a bit slower. I just wonder whether or not he's won tournaments with this style, but could he win the world championship playing like this? And if Mark listens to this, I don't want him to take it the wrong way because he's got to do what he feels it. But he's won events with this new style, but whether he can win the world championship with this not being his natural style, I'm not so sure. Um, and I would like to see Mark win the world championship one day. But I don't know whether or not this game he'd be able to do that for 2.5 weeks.
It would be tough, and I think it's one of the reasons why I think Zhang Ander's not doing so well this season. I think it's just not sustainable over such a long period of time. It's But lest we forget, Mark Allen, as we said earlier, he won the shootout last season. So
Yeah,
he is
yeah,
capable of playing
yeah,
quick, thinking quickly, executing the
yes,
plan quickly.
yeah, yeah,
So he can do it, and he can win longer tournaments. He won the Champion of Champions last season.
yes,
So
yeah.
he's winning
Perhaps,
tournaments. That's the bottom line. That's what snooker players want to do. And
perhaps he's trying to do what Judd Trump's doing. And what I mean by that, he can win ugly, he can win battling, scrapping away, and like I say, Mark Allen was world number one a couple of months ago. So perhaps he's not deliberately going into a match thinking, oh, I'm going to slow things down. I'm going to play safe most of the time, etc. I don't think he goes into games with that sort of attitude. Um, I think he's had to sort of like he's forcing himself perhaps to play this way in case he needs to, if that makes sense. Whereas before in the previous years of his career, if it wasn't an open game, perhaps he might have struggled. So it's definitely something he's been working on, and it has been paying dividend over the last couple of years. He's won what 5, 6 big events in 24 months, etc.
yeah, he's done all right. It's
Yeah. like I say, in terms of back to Murphy, I've read some quotes that he said. Murphy's entitled to say that, but Allen's perfectly entitled to play like that, as far as I'm concerned. The ref at the end of the day, you've got the referee there. If a referee feels as if there's unnecessary slow play, they can warn a player. We saw it in the qualifiers with Stan Moody, which is I don't know if many people
Yeah,
saw that. The referee warned Stan for slow play. Um, Interesting with Stan, because I saw Stan's dad on Facebook comment about this, saying that Stan suffers from the yips, so a bit like dartitis, or what you get in golf. So he has to get up and down a couple of times. So that's perhaps a little bit different. Um, but yeah, a referee. At the end of the day, the referee is in charge. They have the power to warn a player if they're playing slow play. The referee didn't. All okay in my book.
well, yeah, and we need to give the referees the respect to actually make that judgment call. Then the
Mhm.
referees aren't just picked randomly off the street. They know what they're doing. There's training, there's experience involved,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're good referees. Yeah,
very.
they know the score, and they will know if a player is taking liberties with time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose it comes back to the same old argument. If everybody played the same way, the sport would be pretty boring, to be honest. It's the
Oh
clash
yeah,
of styles
yeah,
which makes it interesting.
yeah,
Now, Barry
definitely.
Hawkins, he may be an attacking player, but he's not a particularly quick player. I don't find it when I'm watching him. I don't find him particularly quick. Okay, and I think there is often a conflation between quick and attacking, and it's not
Yeah,
always the case.
yeah. No, I agree.
If someone
I agree.
plays an attacking game, it's always quick. Not always.
No, I agree.
So,
I agree.
and I think
I
Barry
think that's
Hawkins is a good example of that.
I think that's like a thing that people misinterpret Mark Selby at times. Mark Selby can be a very attacking player. A really sort of elaborate shot selection. So, and he comes from like a pool background as well, Mark Selby. I think his shot selection, perhaps he's not the quickest of thinkers, with all due respect, but his actual game, he does play a very attacking game. But people don't see it like that because perhaps his average shot time is a little bit more than other people.
Yeah, and he does get a lot of criticism, and he's often the one who is singled out
Mm.
for, he's slow, he's a grinder.
I love the way he
He's
goes about breaks.
yeah, he's like fifth on the century list or something like
Mm.
that, isn't he?
Mm.
He might hit a 147 in a World Championship final. You don't do that if you're a boring player.
Exactly.
Uh, Barry Hawkins. Okay, he was the runner-up. How would you assess his week? It's more than a week for Barry Hawkins. He
Yeah,
qualified.
exactly. Well, there we go. It's 2 weeks, and amazing effort from Barry. Amazing effort. And I grew up with sort of Judd Trump in terms of sort of when I was playing junior competition. So I kind of always root for Judd. And if I'm being totally honest, I did want Judd to win the final, but nothing. Nobody would have been upset if Barry won it. He is the ultimate nice guy, isn't he? Nobody, and you saw from the support that he had in the crowd last night. It's brilliant. And what a fantastic 2 weeks it was. I mean, he come into the event as world number 20, had to win a couple of qualifying matches, um, got through qualifying, pretty comfortably. And then look, he's beaten 3 UK champions on the way. He's knocked out Ronnie, who he's got a rotten record against in terms of head to heads. Come back from 4-2 down, played faultless for pretty much 4 frames. Um, Sean Murphy, last 4 frames in that he was absolutely outstanding from 2-2. Obviously beat Mark Allen, another UK champion. And the last 16 against Gilbert, he was within 3 or 4 pots of going out. Gilbert missed the green, would have been
Yep.
perfect on the brown at 5-4 up. So, we wouldn't be talking about Barry Hawkins today, if Gilbert had potted that green, because he would have been perfect on the brown. So for Barry, a brilliant week. It's got him back into the Masters, back into top 16. Just short in the final again, but look, the players he's facing in these Triple Crown finals, he's played Ronnie in 2, Neil Robertson, Judd Trump. I mean, it is tough. I mean, you can't criticize. I don't want anybody saying, "Oh, Barry's lost again in another Triple Crown." What?
He's a
In all
choker.
four,
Yeah. Oh,
all four of those
nonsense.
finals, he was the firm underdog with no disrespect. Do you know what I mean? Um, and last night was the closest he's got. And if that red had gone in at 9-8, where it's just gone to the near jaw, he's winning that frame, isn't he? Because Judd come in and and
Yeah.
made pretty much the match winning contribution. What would have happened that decider? I mean, that would have been amazing to watch. I don't know how that would have panned out, but Barry should be so proud of his efforts over the last sort of 2 weeks.
I sent you a message last night. Actually, it was frame 14, which was the key for me. 7-6 to Judd Trump.
Yes, and he
Maybe
was up,
Barry had a
wasn't he?
chance, but
Yeah,
at 8-6, it's just 7 each.
yeah.
Bang. First to three, or first to three from that point anyway. But 8-6, that pressure does go up. And then at 9-6, then it's all or nothing in every
I think
frame.
I think it was a brilliant final. I mean, if you look at the element, Trump took the advantage, but Hawkins was hanging on, wasn't he? He was hanging on, made that counter clearance in frame 4, made an amazing counter clearance in frame 8, where there was a couple of balls on cushions to sort of stay in touch. And he just kept trying to grab onto Trump, was it like, from 6-3 to 6-5, 7-6, he's one frame behind, got back from 9-6 to 9-8, but Trump always just had that one frame advantage. And again, that's credit to Judd for seeing off that danger, keeping him at arm's length. That's Judd, not Barry bottling it or whatever. Barry played a fantastic match where he dug in, showed great heart, desire, bottle, but Judd just had a little bit more, a little bit extra.
I've always compared that ability to. I've always used the tennis analogy with that. It's when you get the most successful players, so Rafa Nadal, Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, especially in the modern era. If it's 4-4 in a set and they find themselves 15-30 down or love 30 down on their own serve, they will win the next point. They will find something at that crucial moment. They'll find just that extra gear which they can just kick in, even if it's just for 1 point or one shot or one little break. And I thought Judd Trump did that. He just had that little bit extra, as you said. And it was frame 14 and 15. They were the keys. And you never know, just if one of those goes Barry's way, maybe it'll be different. But had that happened, and we get to a decider, then the pressure's all on Judd at that point.
Yeah, but you just don't know, and that's the amazing thing about snooker, isn't it? I mean, from 9-6, Trump it was 7-6. Trump won 2 brilliant frames to go 9-6 up, and people are thinking it's a done deal then. But then Barry comes back like a train. He's played 2 faultless frames, 9-8. Trump has not scored a point, not played a shot virtually, and then Trump had that red at the start of frame 18, didn't he? And he's missed it.
Yeah.
A red he would get 9 times out of 10. And Trump's, he was at the table, wasn't he? He just stood there for a little bit, and you thought, hang on a minute, he's feeling it here. He is feeling it here. He's just missed the red. Barry come in, made 30 odd, but then missed the red into the middle. So then for Judd to sort of compose himself, even though the balls were kind of there, he had to mind his work and do a few little things. He got pretty much the job done there and there. I know there was drama with the snookers afterwards, but huge credit for Judd to stand up to that pressure, because Barry gave it to him. And if it was a decider, goodness knows what would have happened. Because, you could say all the momentum was with Barry, but deciding frame is sort of like its own match. You just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if Barry, he might have just carried on, or Judd might have found something. But I think it's a really good game. I think it was, and I think it follows on from a succession of really good UK finals in recent years. I think the Ronnie Ding final in 2023 is a really good final. Year before that, Mark Allen Ding Junhui, Allen come back from a few frames down. That was a good final. Luca Brissell versus Zhao Xingtong. The 2020 final, which was behind closed doors. That went to the last pink. I think we've had some really good UK finals in recent years. Not so much like world finals. A few world finals in recent years haven't sort of, perhaps been as keenly contested or whatever. But brilliant tournament.
For Judd, he's on 30 ranking titles now. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And I know there are still going to be some detractors who say, "Oh, he's only won one world championship and only 5 Triple Crown events." I mean, he's bit by bit. I mean, this is 3 big titles this season, as you mentioned earlier. These 3 biggest events of the season. Right? I don't think anyone would put him on their Mount Rushmore of snooker yet. But if he keeps going this way, with a few more world championships, he'll get there eventually. What do you think?
In terms of Mount Rushmore, yeah, perhaps. For me, he's already a great of the sport. He is one of the greats. He's been a world number 1. He's won 30 ranking titles. For goodness sake, five,
What a
five,
loser!
five Triple Crown titles. For me, he was already a great before this season. Yes, he probably does need to be a multiple world champion to be considered for a Mount Rushmore. That's just the way it is. But I think Judd is. We're in an era. Let's be honest. I know a lot of players from the 90s may not agree. This is the best standard era we've ever had. The standard is sensational in terms of not necessarily the top players. Them from their equivalents to the 90s are similar, but in terms of sort of overall quality, strength, and depth of the circuit, where you've got like the top 64, top 80, who can give anybody a game in the rankings to consistently win titles. Of course, there's loads more ranking events than there were in the 80s and 90s. We know that. But the opposition, the people who can, contend, get to latter rounds, for Judd to keep doing it and doing it and doing it, he is one of the greats of all time. But yeah, all the talk now is going to be about, he's got to win another world championship. He's got 2 Masters, 2 UKs. If he wins a world championship again, I think people can sort of pipe down a little bit in terms of it. Oh, he's not a great, etc., etc. And everybody's entitled to their opinion. Don't get me wrong. But the world championship only happens once a year. Only one person can be world champion once a year. So, yeah, he's, as I said, when I was playing, Judd was in the same sort of national tournaments, under 13s, under 15s, under 17s level, when he was like 8, 9 years old. It was crazy. We knew back then he was the one you were looking at in the draw. So, if we had, back in the day where you used to actually send draws via post instead of online.
God.
You get the draw and you'd be looking for Judd Trump before your name. Do you say, where's Judd Trump in the draw? I don't want to draw him. And you just knew that he was going to be a great of the sport back then. Yeah, he's amazing.
It's all luck, though, isn't it? Yeah, it's all luck.
Yeah, all luck. Yeah. Well, it's. I think you've got those elements. You've got Ronnie O'Sullivan fans. You've got Ronnie O'Sullivan fans who are not snooker fans. They're Ronnie O'Sullivan fans.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit like Alex Higgins in the 80s, where they were Alex Higgins fans, not snooker fans, and they almost sort of take, because Judd Trump is a threat to Ronnie.
Absolutely.
They sort of take it personally, and Judd's lucky. He's this, he's that. Just for goodness sake, Ronnie loves Judd to bits by the all counts. Do you know what I mean? They've got a really good relationship with each other. They respect their games, etc. Just if you're a Ronnie fan, why wouldn't you admire Judd Trump's game as well? It's Judd's not going to get to 7 world titles. With no disrespect, in this modern, this year, Judd's not going to get to 7 titles, 8 Masters, 8 UKs. Almost certainly he won't. And that's not a criticism to Judd. I'm just saying the strength and depth now is so much. But if he can get to sort of I don't know what his ceiling is. If he could maybe get to 3s or 4s in those 4s, maybe a 5 somewhere, But for me, he's already a great at the sport.
And before we look at season predictions, speaking of greats of the sport, the sad news after the UK Championship that Terry Griffiths passed away, age of 77. What are your memories of Terry?
Oh, well, it's incredibly sad, and it's another one of our greats. departed over the last couple of months. We've seen, Ray Reardon pass and Clive Everton. Um, he, we talk about the golden era of snooker, and I don't necessarily like that term because snooker is more global than ever now. But I know what people mean. The golden era of snooker in the 70s and 80s in the UK. Terry was a household name, when the sport was absolutely booming. And it's it's so sad because he's had such an influence away from the table as well in terms of coaching so many players. And we've seen the tributes pour out on social media since last night from so many players like Mark Allen, Mark Williams, Stephen Hendry, so many players who, worked with Terry either sort of in the coaching side or the media side because he commentated for several years for BBC as well. So he was an ultimate super snooker star on and off the table. Won all 3 Triple Crown events, second player ever to achieve, the trio. Very sad. Me personally, my memories of him, I started watching snooker sort of, around sort of like 92, 93. So Terry was probably, he was in the winter of his career back then. But I remember personally when he was at the Crucible in 95, 96, where he beat like Jamie Burnett in that sensational game where it went to the Southern end. He played Mark Williams as well. So you could see that there was like an aura around him, wasn't it? He was one of the greats. And the respect players had for him as well. It just shows what a big deal he was, and still is in the snooker world. He's etched forever. His name's on that trophy, on all those trophies, and it always will be. And people won't forget him.
It was a month or two ago I spoke to Colin Matty, WPBSA coach, and he learned under the wing of Terry Griffiths. And even one of the stories that Colin told was, learning from Terry Griffiths. Terry Griffiths said to Colin, his student, so to speak, I'll probably learn something from you today. And Colin didn't really understand that. But what I took from that, and I wasn't there, I'm hearing this secondhand, but what I took from that was that there is some humility there. And, okay, this man won all 3 Triple Crown events, clearly one of the most respected players of his era, on and off the table. But he knew that you can never achieve perfection. So that just told me that there was no arrogance about the man. Despite his success, he remembered who he was, and snooker is a sport for people, really. And I thought that was quite an interesting little anecdote that Colin shared. And 77 years old. I know that he'd been ill recently, but no, it's sad news, and I think it's one of the times where we use in the English language the word outpouring, an outpouring of emotion, outpouring of sadness for the loss of one of the most recognisable people.
And it's also, on the day of the UK Championship as well, Dave Hendon said in a tweet, a bit bittersweet. It was so bizarre last night, wasn't it? I mean, we've just had that dramatic final in York, and then the news broke about Terry Griffiths passing away. It was almost like surreal. It was just bizarre. But Terry, absolute icon, legend, and touched so many sort of players' lives. Such an impact in the sport, and he'll never be forgotten.
Rest in peace, Terry Griffiths.
Yeah.
Terry, I think, he would want the show to go on.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Absolutely, he would. Yeah. What are your predictions? Any wild predictions for the rest of the season? Any tournaments you're heading to?
Masters. I'm going to the Masters. So being sort of, down here in southwest England, it's kind of a localish event getting to our capital city. So Masters, hopefully I'll be at the Worlds for a few days as well. Maybe going to a few of the qualifiers because Hayden Pinney, who's like one of the new pros, I'm very friendly with him. We've played in the same team, so I might be coming up with him to one of his sort of qualifiers up the line. But prediction-wise, I don't know. How can you predict this season? I think what we'll see is But will we see? Oh, you've got me here, Dan. I really don't. I can't predict anything at the minute. I think Judd is going to be a contender for all the big titles. There we go. That's not much of a prediction, but I think Ronnie. And we've not really talked about Ronnie, have we?
No,
We've not talked about the goat.
no, he's not
um,
really done much
um,
worth
I
speaking
I
about, to be
think
honest. It's
I think with Ronnie, I think that at the Champion of Champions and the UK Championship, I think he looked really good. I think he looked on it. I think he was focused. He was determined. But he just come again up against two players who had inspired spells of frames, like Gudon 4 frames, Hawkins 4 frames, and I really think that hurt Ronnie in both those events because I think he fancied the job. So I really do think he's a big contender at the Masters. I know that's not a very bold prediction to say he's the defending champion,
Ronnie
but
might win a tournament.
yeah, but he's not won a tournament now since Riyadh, the gold ball event. So he'll
True.
be up for that as well before Christmas, obviously, with all his connections now with Saudi Arabia and the big prize money on offer. So I think we'll see Ronnie win tournaments this season. I really do, as long as he's got the same attitude as he had um, in Bolton and York. And yeah, Kyron, I think he's going to be a contender for the big pots as well. Judd, he's going to win more trophies, almost certainly. Seriously, almost certainly he's going to win. He's going to win more trophies this season. And perhaps ask me that question in March before the World Championship comes up. Then I'll
Yes,
give you
we'll
a
have a
prediction
bit more to
for
go on.
the world.
Yeah. No, thanks for your time. I just wanted to. Oh no, it's good to pick apart these events sometimes, especially an
Hmm.
event of this of this magnitude. It
Yeah.
is a big event. Players do
Yes.
target this one. This is one of the, in terms of prestige, in terms of history, in terms of prize money as well. This is something that matters in
There
snooker
was a
more
buzz
than
last night,
most.
wasn't it?
There
When the
really
players
was.
when the players walked down those steps with the music on, even I felt it. There was a little sort of like when your hairs stick up, it's like, oh, this is a big
Yeah,
occasion.
it's
I
like a
love it.
big fight feel almost. It's
Love it. Yeah.
yeah, and okay, Barry Hawkins was the underdog, but you know what? Sometimes you need that. But that just added to the
Yeah.
emotion of it. There was a little bit of jeopardy there for Judd, and
Yeah.
it was a good occasion for snooker. That was. No, thank you for coming back to the Snooker podcast and discussing it with me. And of course, you're always welcome back another time.
Brilliant. It's been a pleasure, Dan. Thanks very much for having me on.
Likewise.
Take
See you
care.
soon. Thank you again to Michael Day for joining me on the Snooker Hall podcast. It is a very busy time for snooker at the moment. The UK Championship may be done, but in a few days, the snooker shootout will begin in Leicester. Keep an eye on your podcast feed on Wednesday morning when I speak to Stephen Hallworth for a quick preview of that event. The Scottish Open begins soon after. Gary Wilson is the two-time defending champion in Edinburgh, looking to make it a hat-trick of triumphs, but he will face stiff competition. Later this week, I meet with Paul Collier, former snooker referee and current tournament director for World Snooker. Paul will share some details about the role and the responsibilities of a tournament director. So if you have any questions for Paul about this, you can email the show. Contact us at thesnookerhall.com or get in touch with the show on X, Instagram, or Blue Sky. The handle for all platforms is at the Snooker Hall. That is all for today. The snooker shootout is coming up, as I said. Keep an eye out for the preview on Wednesday morning. A lot of snooker happening over the coming weeks, so settle in, enjoy it, and until next time, take care.